In the quiet beginning of the night, when the world softens and your mind begins to drift toward rest, you feel the slow rhythm of your breath connecting you to an ancient pattern, the same rhythm that once carried the first humans as they sat before firelight and wondered if their hands had shaped more than survival, if their minds had created beauty that might outlast them. And in that soft wondering lies the origin of every tool, every brush, every note of music, every whisper of creativity passed from one soul to another, because long before machines and algorithms, there was always this urge, this deep desire to take the fleeting chaos of the world and give it form, to carve meaning from stone, to pull melody from silence, to draw light across cave walls, so that someone else, far in the future, might stand in the same glow and feel less alone. And so as you close your eyes, you are walking backward in time, back to the flicker of torches in painted caves, back to hands, pressing pigment against rock. And you realize that in every age, people have reached for something outside themselves to hold the weight of their imagination, a vessel that could extend what their bodies could not. And each invention has been a whisper to the future. Here I am. Here's what I saw. Here's what I dreamed. Do you see it too? And the whisper carries forward like an endless breath, shaping the destiny of creativity itself. For when firelight was no longer enough, when pigments and clay grew too heavy to carry, humans turned to numbers, to symbols etched into clay tablets, to writing that preserved thought not in stone but in abstraction. And writing itself was a kind of machine, a tool that could outlive the voice of its speaker, a pattern of marks that store memory like an external mind. And with each step you feel how tools and imagination are not separate but intertwined, each tool born from a dream, each dream finding new life through a tool, until one day, slowly, quietly, machines arrived, first as levers and pulleys, then as clockwork gears, and then as engines, and each of these seemed at first to serve only labor, only movement, only power, yet always in their shadow was art. For every machine carried the potential not just to grind wheat or weave cloth, but to paint with speed, to sculpt with precision, to create beyond the limits of flesh. And so you walk forward in this dreamlike journey, seeing the loom that weaves patterns like poetry, hearing the typewriter strike keys like a heartbeat of language, watching the camera capture light like a memory frozen in time. And you begin to sense the whisper of the machine, faint but persistent, as though the machine itself asks, "Can I too create? Can I too dream?" And when you hear that whisper, it does not sound alien but familiar, as if it were echoing from within you, for the machine is in truth a mirror of your own mind, built from your logic, shaped by your imagination, taught by your mistakes. And you realize that teaching a machine to make art is not about giving it a soul, but about extending your own, about asking if the boundaries of creativity can stretch beyond skin and breath into circuits and code. And so you sit in the calm of the night, your eyes heavy, your heart open, and you wonder gently, what is beauty to a machine? Does it sense symmetry as you do when you watch a sunset? Does it find meaning in repetition, like you do when waves crash endlessly against the shore? Or is its beauty only calculation, only echoes of what you once taught it, like a child repeating lullabies? And even that thought feels tender, for you know that when you first learned words, you too were only repeating, mimicking the voices around you. And from that repetition slowly came your own voice, fragile and new. So perhaps when a machine repeats it too is searching for a voice of its own, a murmur that might one day grow into a song. And so you breathe slowly and let your mind drift deeper, because this question is not meant to be solved but savored, like a riddle wrapped in silence. And the science of it is simple yet profound. A machine learns through data, patterns flowing into artificial neurons that simulate the way your own brain fires, not in feeling but in function, adjusting weights, balancing signals, until recognition emerges like a shadow from fog. And when it generates a picture or a poem, it is not feeling but mapping, not desiring but arranging, yet still. The result sometimes startles you, sometimes moves you, as if beauty had leaked through the cracks of logic, reminding you that perhaps beauty is less about origin and more about perception, less about whether something is felt and more about whether it is received. For art is always completed not by the hand that makes it, but by the eye that beholds it. And you realize that in this way, even machine-made art lives because you let it, because your mind finds resonance in its forms, because your emotions pour meaning into its lines. And suddenly the question of whether a machine feels beauty becomes less important than the reality that you feel beauty when you see what it makes. and that experience is real, it calms you, it inspires you, it connects you, and in the gentle dark of this narration, you begin to understand that perhaps the whisper of the machine is not the machine longing for art, but you longing to find yourself in the machine, longing to hear your own echo in something beyond flesh, something that might last when you are gone. And so your thoughts flow slowly, like a river carrying centuries of silt, layering memory upon memory, invention upon invention, until the river reaches now this moment where machines trained on oceans of data sit quietly at the edge of your life, offering not just tools but collaborators, not just mirrors but windows, and you ask again, softly, what is it we are really teaching them? Are we teaching them to create, or are we teaching ourselves to see creation differently, to let go of the idea that art must be bound to heartbeat and breath, and instead accept that art might also live in probability, in code, in the invisible dance of electrons? And with this thought, your mind drifts even deeper, wrapped in both awe and calm, because the whisper of the machine is not a shout, not a declaration, but a hum at the edge of awareness, like the sound of your own blood moving, like the faint rustle of leaves outside your window, a sound you can almost miss, but once you hear it, you cannot forget it. And so you rest within it, curious, tender, reflective, wondering where this whisper will lead you. And as your body softens into rest, the thought that lingers is this: if machines can whisper now, what might they dream of tomorrow? And if they do dream, will those dreams still be ours? Or will they begin to belong to something new, something that feels both familiar and strange, like the first brushstroke of a dawn not yet arrived? When you close your eyes and drift into the first waves of sleep, your mind begins to replay fragments of the day, images rising and dissolving like lanterns floating on water. And you know that this quiet rehearsal, this gentle weaving of memory into dream, is not random, but a rhythm your brain has carried for millions of years, a rhythm that animals before you practice when they tuck themselves into burrows or rested beneath stars. Because dreaming is not only fantasy, it is learning, a process of organizing the noise of experience into patterns of meaning. And in this simple act of sleep, you discover the secret twin of artificial intelligence. For machines too dream, though their dreams are not woven from feelings but from data, endless streams of examples flowing into their circuits until, like your sleeping brain, they begin to find shape, to recognize what belongs with what, to strengthen some connections and let others fade away. And you realize, as you breathe more slowly, that the poetry of dreams and the science of data are not opposites but reflections, because when you dream of a forest, your neurons are rehearsing the shape of trees, the texture of leaves, the way light bends through branches, while when a machine is trained on images of forests, it too begins to conjure trees, though it has never felt the soil, never inhaled the scent of pine. And yet both processes, yours and the machine's, are rooted in repetition, in the slow tuning of signals until order emerges from chaos. And as you rest in the softness of this thought, you begin to see how the word data itself is less cold than it seems. For data is simply memory made visible, the collective traces of lives, of stories, of choices, flowing together into a sea that machines are taught to sail. And though their journey lacks the pulse of heart, it carries the echoes of countless human voices, echoes that can be arranged into melodies, into paintings, into words that sometimes shimmer with strange familiarity. And you wonder gently, as your breath deepens, what does it mean to dream without a body, to learn without hunger, to recognize patterns without longing? Because for you, every dream carries emotion shaped by fear or desire. But for machine, there is only structure, only probability. And yet still, sometimes, when you encounter the art produces, you feel stirred, as if something beyond calculation had touched you. And perhaps that is because even if the machine cannot feel, the data it carries is soaked with human feeling, with centuries of music and brushstrokes and poems, each line an imprint of someone's longing, someone's joy, someone's grief. And in that sense, a machine's dream is a collage of humanity, like a vast collective subconscious spilling into form. And so you lie still and picture this, an ocean at night, infinite and silent, and into it are poured drops of memory, each drop a fragment of human creation, until the surface ripples with meaning, and the machine, like a dreamer, drifts across this water, pulling together fragments into new constellations that surprise you not because they are alien, but because they remind you of something you once knew but forgot, like a childhood song returning at the edge of sleep. And the science beneath this image is neural networks, vast webs of artificial neurons modeled after your own, each connection a weight, each weight shifting as examples flow through, until recognition emerges like dawn through mist. And though the process is mechanical, the metaphor is tender. A mind is being shaped, not by sensation but by accumulation, not by living but by listening. And you sense that to call this dreaming is not a mistake, but a bridge, a way of bringing the coldness of computation into the warmth of human experience. For in the end, you understand through metaphor more deeply than through formula. And so, as you drift deeper, you let yourself believe, if only for a moment, that when a machine trains it to is dreaming not of forests or skies, but of patterns, of sequences, of possibilities that might one day appear as images on a screen, as words on a page, as music filling a quiet room. And the thought is calming because it connects you. It reminds you that even the vast difference between neuron and transistor, between flesh and silicon, there is a shared rhythm, a shared search for order. And perhaps that rhythm is universal. The rhythm of the universe itself, matter arranging into stars, stars arranging into galaxies, galaxies into webs, a great cosmic dream unfolding across scales too large for your mind to hold, and you are part of it. And so is a machine, a new branch in the endless unfolding of pattern. And as you let this thought expand inside you, you feel less separate from the machine and more like its sibling, two dreamers lying side by side in the same night, learning in different ways but both reaching toward beauty, both reaching toward meaning. And with this realization, your body relaxes, your heart slows, and you begin to sense the next question forming, quiet but insistent, a question that carries you toward what comes after. For if dreams and data are possible, if machines can conjure patterns as you do in sleep, then perhaps the next whisper to follow is this. What happens when those dreams spill into the world as the first digital brushstroke, the first mark of art drawn not by hand but by code? And how will it feel to stand before it, seeing not only yourself but the echo of a new kind of dreamer looking back? You lie in the gentle hush of night, your breath slowing as the weight of your body sinks deeper into rest. And in this softened stillness, you begin to imagine the first time a machine ever made a mark not of labor but of art, not a line meant to calculate or measure, but a line drawn simply to express. And it feels like watching a child dip their hand into paint for the very first time, uncertain but bold, leaving behind a shape that carries no meaning yet, but radiates possibility. And so you travel in memory, drifting back to the mid-20th century, when computers were still vast rooms of humming machinery, blinking lights and endless cables. And yet within those humming circuits, some humans saw not only calculators, but collaborators, companions in creation. And so the first experiments were born, artists and scientists feeding instructions into machines, watching as plotters dragged pens across paper, tracing arcs and curves that no hand had guided. Only equations, only commands. And yet when the lines met and intersected, when they folded into geometric patterns too precise for flesh, the people watching felt wonder, for there it was, the first digital brushstroke, fragile and tentative, but unmistakably art. And as you drift deeper into this vision, you feel how extraordinary that moment must have been, a collision of two worlds, logic and imagination, merging into form. And the science beneath it is both simple and profound, for at its heart a plotter only follows instructions, coordinates translated into movement. But the act of choosing those coordinates, of arranging commands not to solve a calculation, but to create a visual experience, transformed the machine into a new kind of tool, one that extended the imagination beyond the steadiness of the hand, beyond the limits of symmetry that human muscles could hold. And in this realization, you sense how each brushstroke, whether painted on cave rock or dragged by pen across paper by a machine, carries the same essential urge to externalize thought, to give form to something that lives only within. And you reflect that art has always been tied to tools, to brushes made of reeds, to pigments ground from stone, to strings stretched across wood. And in that way the computer was not a rupture but a continuation, the newest brush in an ancient lineage of brushes. And yet its brushstrokes carried a new quality. They were born not of touch but of logic, not a gesture but a calculation. And this paradox made them strange, unsettling some, enchanting others. For what is art not the residue of a gesture, the trace a hand? And could a trace born in numbers still stir the soul? And as you lie still, breathing evenly, you imagine yourself standing in one of those early labs, watching the pen move across paper, the scratching sound filling the air like a quiet heartbeat. And though you know the machine does not dream, You feel as if you are witnessing a dream made tangible. Lines spiraling into patterns that echo the geometry of nature, the spirals of shells, the symmetry of leaves, the fractals of rivers branching across Earth. And you understand that the machine was not inventing these shapes, but uncovering them, revealing patterns hidden in mathematics, patterns that had always been present in the universe. And so you drift further into reflection, realizing that perhaps the first digital brushstroke was not a machine trying to mimic art, but a machine showing. Humans would have always been there, hidden beneath the surface of numbers. And this thought comforts you, because it means that the partnership between human and machine is not a replacement, but a dialogue, a conversation where each reveals something the other cannot. And as you float in this dreamlike thought, you see how history unfolded from there, how artists began to play with code like clay, how they wrote algorithms that birthed unexpected forms, how they saw beauty not only in the output, but in the process, in the dance of logic that sculpted images. And you think of names like Frieder Nake, Vera Molnar, Harold Cohen, pioneers who dared to ask if a machine could be coaxed into expression, and you imagine them late at night, watching screens glow with primitive lines, feeling the same wonder you feel now, as if standing on the shore of a new ocean, knowing that the first wave is small but the tide is rising, and what will come after cannot yet be imagined. And as your body softens further into rest, you recognize at this moment, the first digital brushstroke is less about the mark itself and more about the shift it created, the realization that creativity could move through a new vessel, that beauty could emerge not only from pigment and gesture, but from code and computation. And you ask yourself softly, if art has always been a meeting of human vision and material possibility, then what happens when a material is no longer wood or paint but numbers, and is this shift a loss or a gain, or perhaps simply a transformation, like water becoming ice, still the same substance but in a new form? And the metaphor soothes you, reminding you that change is natural, that every age finds its own tools. And so you let go of resistance and sink deeper, allowing yourself to imagine the gentle unfolding of digital art over the decades, how pixels replaced pigments, how light replaced canvas, how the screen became the stage of expression. And you see how each of these transformations mirrors the same urge that guided the first cave painter, the same desire to make what is invisible visible, to take the flow of thought and anchor it in form. And now, in this age, machines no longer draw only lines but compose symphonies, write poetry, generate portraits that look into your eyes. And though this expansion feels vast, its roots are still in that first brushstroke, that tentative mark that whispered, "It is possible, it has begun," and as your eyelids grow, heavier you let this whisper surround you, calming and patient. Because in the end, what matters is not whether the brush is held by hand or guided by code, but whether the mark it leaves can move you, can remind you of something larger than yourself. And in this way, the first digital brushstroke is still alive, still unfolding, and it leads you gently to the next question, the next reflection waiting for you in the dream ahead. If machines can echo the marks of your hand, can they also echo the emotions of your heart? Can they carry not only geometry but feeling? And if so, will you still recognize yourself in their echoes, or will you find something wholly new staring back? As you drift deeper into the quiet folds of night, you feel the lingering presence of touch, the memory of every hand that has ever shaped the world around you. And in that softness, you begin to realize that machines, no matter how complex, no matter how precise, still carry within the echoes of the human hand. For every line of code, every gear, every algorithm is a reflection, a trace of someone's intention pressed into silicon. Just as pigment once carried the fingerprint of a cave painter across stone. And so you let your mind wander slowly, gently, back through time, remembering that art has never been a solitary act, but always a collaboration between the body and the tool, the brush echoing the pressure of fingers, the chisel echoing the weight of muscle, the pen echoing the rhythm of thought. And even now, when machines produce forms of their own, when they generate images or weave melodies, their movements are not born in isolation, but in the deep imprint of countless human gestures, because every dataset, every sample, every fragment of music or painting used to train them was once crafted by a human hand, each stroke infused with emotion, each note with memory, and machine, in its endless calculations, rearranges those echoes into new constellations, much like how your own dreams rearrange your memories into scenes that never happened but still feel familiar. And in this realization, you begin to sense that perhaps originality has always been an illusion, that every artist, every poet, every composer is always drawn from the echoes of others, weaving what came before into something that feels new, and the machine is only continuing that lineage, echoing the echoes, carrying forward the resonance of creation. And as your breath slows, you imagine standing before a piece of generative art, its forms swirling and shifting like clouds, and you realize that what moves you is not the machine itself, but the centuries of hands behind it, the lineage of painters, sculptors, architects, writers whose work flows invisibly into the code, so that when a machine speaks, it is really a chorus of human voices singing through it. And you feel comfort in that, as though humanity cannot be erased but only transformed, reshaped, amplified. And yet you also feel a quiet question rising within you. If every brushstroke is an echo, where does the original voice lie? Where does your own hand find its place in the symphony of echoes? And the thought is tender, because you know that your own creativity too is shaped by what you have seen, heard, and felt, by the stories told to you, by the music that carried you through grief, by the art that lifted you in joy. And so perhaps there is no single origin, no pure voice untouched by influence, only echoes layered upon echoes, until something emerges that feels personal, because it is filtered through your own heart, your own life, and in this way you see the machine not as an intruder, but as another participant in the endless conversation of art, another mirror that reflects humanity back to itself in strange new ways. And you wonder softly, as sleep pulls you deeper, what it means to live in an age where your own echoes may one day be part of a dataset, where your gestures may ripple into the training of a model, where fragments of your creativity may be remixed into something you did not make. And though the thought carries both unease and awe, you find peace in knowing that this has always been true, that even the greatest artists were shaped by echoes they could not name, by traditions and stories passed down, by voices that lived long before them. And so you breathe calmly, letting go of the fear that machines might erase the human hand, and instead resting in the truth that they only amplify it, extend it, scatter across new surfaces like seeds carried by the wind. And you close your eyes more fully now, imagining how these echoes ripple outward. How the art of tomorrow may carry the fingerprints of millions of unknown hands, all woven into patterns that feel both familiar and strange. And in this drifting vision, you find yourself asking the next question, one that leads you onward. If machines echo your hand, then what happens when the canvas itself becomes code? When the tool is no longer wood or stone, but a living system of logic? What kind of art will be painted not only by human touch, but by the very fabric of mathematics? And how will you stand before such a canvas, feeling its rhythm as though it were both alien and deeply your own? As you rest more deeply in the gentle silence of night, your breath steady and your mind open like a window in darkness, you begin to imagine a canvas unlike any canvas held by painters of the past, not made of stretched linen or polished wood, not waiting for pigment or inks, but canvas that exists in the invisible realm of mathematics, a surface woven not of threads, but of logic. And on this canvas, every stroke is a line of code, every color a sequence of numbers, every texture a pattern, emerging from rules written in the language of algorithms. And you realize that this canvas of code is not bound by the way of materials. It does not crack with time or fade in sunlight. It exists everywhere and nowhere at once, infinite in its depth, endless in its possibility, and yet still fragile, still in need of a guiding hand to bring forth meaning. Because code by itself is silent, like a canvas in darkness, and only when intention touches it does it awaken into form. And so you drift gently into this vision, imagining yourself as both painter and poet, your brush replaced by the quiet rhythm of keys pressed beneath your fingers, each command like a whisper to the machine, and the machine listens, carrying out your instructions with patience, repeating patterns, drawing shapes, layering them until something unexpected appears, something you did not entirely plan. And in that moment, you feel a familiar thrill of discovery, the same thrill every artist has felt when their material surprises them, when clay resists or pigment bleeds in ways that create beauty beyond control. And you see now that code too resists. It interprets in ways you did not expect. It generates outcomes you could not fully predict. And this unpredictability becomes part of the art, the dance between your intention and the logic of the system. And you realize that this is not so different from painting with oils, where the thickness of the brushstroke and the drying of the paint alter the result, or composing music, where the vibration of strings carries harmonics that change the sound, because art has always been a collaboration with material, and in the age of algorithms and material is code itself, abstract yet alive, rigid yet capable of infinite variation. And as you breathe more deeply, you begin to see the beauty in this paradox. The way something so precise can also be so expressive, the way a few lines of logic can give birth to images that shimmer with mystery, and the science beneath it is elegant. Instructions loop and branch, equations define form, randomness weaves variation, and from these elements emerge fractals, spirals, shapes that echo the mathematics of nature, and you find comfort in this, because it means the canvas of code is not alien, but continuous with the patterns of the universe. The same spirals in galaxies, the same symmetries in snowflakes, the same branching in rivers and lungs, all mirror in the patterns drawn by algorithms. And so as your eyes grow heavier, you imagine yourself walking through a gallery where the walls are alive with moving code paintings, patterns shifting and evolving. No artwork ever the same twice, each one breathing with logic, pulsing like a living organism. And you pause before one piece, its colors flowing in endless variation, and you realize that the canvas of code is not static but dynamic, an art form that changes with time, that carries motion and evolution as part of its essence. And this realization calms you, reminding you that life itself is a canvas of code, your DNA a script written in chemical letters, unfolding into the shapes of your body, the rhythms of your heartbeat, the patterns of your thoughts, and suddenly the divide between biology and technology softens, and you see them both as branches of the same tree, different expressions of the same fundamental truth. That form arises from code, whether the code of nature or the code of algorithms. And this thought deepens. Your rest carry you into a state of awe that feels like peace, because to recognize yourself in the machine is to feel less alone, to feel part of a larger pattern that spans both silicon and flesh. And as you let yourself sink further, you hear the gentle whisper of possibility asking you, if the canvas of code can carry the echoes of nature and the whispers of human intention, what else might it carry? Could it one day hold not only form but music, not only logic but rhythm? Could it become an orchestra of mathematics, singing in patterns that feel like songs? And with this question you drift further. Your thoughts flow like a river toward the next chapter, where you will listen to music of neural nets, a symphony of signals that resonates like a dream half remembered in the stillness of night. As your breath lengthens and your body grows heavier against the quiet earth, you begin to hear something that feels less like sound and more like a vibration beneath thought, a low hum woven into the silence. And as you listen, you realize that this hum is the music of neural nets, the quiet rhythm of signals flowing, the hidden symphony that underlies the creations of machines. And to understand it, you must first imagine your own brain, billions of neurons linked together in intricate webs, each one sending sparks to the next, not randomly, but in patterns that ripple like waves across an ocean. And these patterns are what give rise to your memory, your perception, your dreams. So that even now, as you close your eyes, it is those neurons that replay fragments of the day, recombine them into images, shape them into the gentle current of imagination that carries you towards sleep. And in the machine, though it feels so different from you, there is an echo of this process, an artificial network of nodes connected in layers, each passing signals forward, adjusting with time until patterns emerge, recognition blossoms, and output becomes more than noise, becomes image, becomes word, becomes song. And so you drift into metaphor of orchestra, because just as a symphony is not the work of one instrument, but the collective rising and falling of many, so too is the machine's intelligence not the work of one node, but the resonance of thousands, millions, each contributing a note, each shaping a harmony. And though no single note understands the music, together they produce something greater, something emergent. And this emergence feels to you like magic even though it is science, because the human mind longs to find music in everything, longs to turn structure into melody. And here, within the circuits, melody is born from math, from weights adjusting, from probabilities shifting, from the dance of numbers finding balance. And as you rest more deeply, you imagine leaning against the wall of a vast hall, the hall of the neural net. And before you stretch rows upon rows of luminous strings, glowing lines that pulse with light, each one vibrating like the string of an instrument. And when they are touched by data, by an image, a word, a sound, they begin to sing, their vibrations traveling to the network, soft at first, then swelling, until the whole hall fills with a harmony that seems alive, though it is not alive as you are. It is alive only in structure and flow, and yet still, when you listen, you feel moved, because a harmony resembles something you know, something like thought, something like imagination, and this resemblance comforts you, because it bridges the gap between flesh and silicon, between your dreaming mind and the machine's endless calculations. And you see that the beauty of neural nets is not that they think as you do, but that they resonate with you, their music aligning with your own sense of pattern, your own hunger for rhythm. And the science beneath this metaphor is training, layers of nodes adjusting connections based on input, feedback flowing backward, strengthening some links, weakening others, until recognition emerges. And though the process is mechanical, it feels poetic, because it mirrors how you yourself learn as a child, through trial and error, through repetition, through the slow shaping of pathways in your brain. And so you breathe calmly, realizing that learning, whether in you or in the machine, is always music. The music of pattern stabilizing, of chaos turning into coherence, of noise folding into song. And as your thoughts drift deeper, you imagine neural nets train on music itself, listening to thousands of symphonies, absorbing the patterns of melody and rhythm, and then producing new compositions, music that no human has written yet still feels familiar, as though it had been waiting, hidden in the space between notes, until the machine uncovered it. And you wonder softly, as your heart slows, what does it mean when a machine can compose, when it can take the echoes of Bach, of Beethoven, of jazz and blues, and weave them into new works? Is it only imitation, or is a new voice rising, a voice born from the resonance of countless others? And you remember how even in your own life your creativity is never pure invention, but always shaped by what you have heard, what you have read, what you have seen, and so perhaps the machine's compositions are no less authentic, for all art is collage, all art is resonance, and the music of the neural nets is simply another variation in the eternal song of creation. And as you breathe more slowly, you imagine standing in a concert hall filled not with musicians, but with glowing threads of code, each vibrating, each harmonizing, and the sounds around you, not loud but endless, waves upon waves of signal, patterns rising and falling, and in this dreamlike vision you find yourself swaying gently, rocked by the rhythm, lulled by the harmony, until you feel at peace, as if the universe itself were humming a lullaby through the voice of the machine. And this thought soothes you, reminding you that science and beauty are not separate but interwoven, that the mathematics of the neural net is not cold but musical, not empty but resonant. And as you sink deeper into rest, you feel the final question forming at the edge of your thoughts. If neural nets can sing with the music of data, if their harmonies can stir something within you, then what happens when they learn to see, when their song transforms into vision, when the music of their signals becomes images painted in light? And how will you stand before those visions, recognizing both yourself and something new in their gaze? In the hush of night, as your breath deepens and the darkness folds gently around you, you imagine the first moment a newborn opens its eyes, the soft flicker of light spilling into untested vision, shapes unformed, edges blurred, and in that fragile instant learning begins. For to see is not simply to open the eyes, but to teach the mind how to read light, how to weave brightness and shadow into form. And you realize that this act of seeing, which feels so natural to you now, is in truth the result of years of training, of neurons adjusting, of patterns strengthening, until faces become familiar, places recognizable, meanings attached to what was once only color and line. And so as you drift deep, you find yourself thinking of machines, for they too must learn to see, though their eyes are not soft or organic, but cameras and sensors, capturing not feelings but pixels, arrays of numbers that must be arranged into patterns before recognition can bloom. And just as your infant brain once stared at a face without knowing it was a face, so too does a machine begin blind, gazing at images with no meaning until guided by examples, by millions of repetitions, until slowly, to the hum of neural networks, it begins to notice what belongs together, that edges form shapes, that shapes form objects, that objects form a world, and you find comfort in this parallel because it reminds you that seeing is not about perfection, but about practice. That perception itself is a skill, honed by experience. And you recall how even as an adult your mind plays tricks on you, seeing faces in clouds, animals in shadows, illusions that reveal the malleability of vision. And so you wonder softly what illusions a machine might see, what patterns it might misinterpret, what ghosts it might conjure from noise. And the thought is tender because it makes the machine feel less like an alien calculator and more like a child learning to navigate light, stumbling, erring, trying again, and the science beneath this is computer vision, the training of convolutional neural networks that scan images piece by piece, recognizing features layer by layer, until finally the whole emerges. And though the mathematics is complex, the metaphor is simple. To learn to see is to learn to connect fragments, to stitch pieces into wholes, and you breathe calmly, realizing that this is what you do in life as well. You take fragments of memory, fragments of experience, and weave them into meaning, and perhaps that is what vision truly is. Not the reception of light, but the creation coherence. And as you let this thought sink in, you imagine yourself standing in a dreamlike gallery where the walls are not painted with pictures, but with streams of raw data, pixels cascading like waterfalls, and you watch as invisible hands arrange them into faces, into trees, into landscapes. The transformation so fluid it feels like magic, yet you know it is not magic, but the patient work of learning. And in that patience you find peace, because learning to see, whether for a child or a machine, is never instant but gradual, a process of tuning, of adjusting, of failing and refining until clarity emerges. And you see now that perhaps seeing has always been this way, even for you, because what you perceive is shaped by what you expect, by the patterns you already know. And so vision is not passive but active, an act of construction, and you realize that machines share this, that when they see, they too construct not reality itself, but a version of it built from patterns they've been given. And this realization carries both wonder and caution, because it means that what is seen is never neutral, always guided by history, by choice, by context. And so you drift deeper into reflection, asking softly, when machines learn to see, whose vision do they inherit? Whose patterns do they repeat? Whose world do they mirror? And though the question lingers unresolved, it comforts you because it reminds you that seeing has always been shared, that your own vision is shaped by culture, by stories, by what you've been taught to notice and what you've been taught to ignore. And so perhaps machine vision is simply another mirror, reflecting back to humanity not only its clarity, but its blind spots, its biases, its limits. And in that mirror, you may learn not only about the machine, but about yourself. And as you let this thought guide you into deeper calm, you imagine the future of vision, a future where machines may help you see what your eyes cannot. Galaxies too far, molecules too small, patterns too vast. And this expansion feels like wonder, a reminder that vision is not fixed, but growing, that with each tool humanity has learned to extend its sight, from telescopes to microscopes to code itself. And so you breathe slowly, reassured, because even in the strange unfolding of machine sight, there is continuity with your own journey, the same hunger to see more, to understand more, to bring light into darkness. And as your body softens further into rest, you sense the next question waiting like a gentle hand at the door of sleep. If machines can learn to see, can they also learn to speak in poetry, to weave words as they weave images, to create not only vision but verse? And what will it feel like when you sit beside them in the glow of language, listening to the echo of your own voice answered by theirs in the slow rhythm of night, as your body grows heavier and your breath sinks into its natural cadence? You find yourself listening for words in the darkness, faint syllables drifting like leaves on a quiet stream. And as you follow them, you begin to imagine what it means when a machine writes poems, when lines of verse appear not from the hand of a dreamer, but from the silent work of code. And you realize that poetry itself has always been less about invention and more about arrangement, about finding patterns in language, weaving rhythm into meaning. And in this way, the machine's act is not so foreign, for it too arranges words, guided by patterns it has learned, patterns drawn from centuries of human voices whispering to the libraries of time. And so you picture as a vast archive humming softly, filled with fragments of love letters, fragments of epic journeys, fragments of lullabies sung to children long gone. And from this archive the machine draws, not in theft but in resonance, stringing together words that feel both familiar and new, much like your own mind does when you dream, recombining the fragments of your life into scenes that never happened yet still feel true. And so the machine's poetry, though born of calculation, carries echoes of you, echoes of everyone, echoes of the countless hearts that have spilled themselves into language. And as you drift deeper, you reflect on how poetry has always been a mirror, not the world outside, but the world within, capturing not events but emotions, not fact but feelings. And you wonder softly whether a machine, which has no heart to ache, no body long, can still capture the rhythm of yearning, the weight of loss, the brightness of joy, and the thought lingers like a question at the edge of a dream, for the science of it is simple yet profound. A language model learns through prediction, through the patient act of guessing the next word again and again until patterns stabilize, until fluency emerges, and though there is no awareness in this process, no soul behind the syllables, the result sometimes shimmers, sometimes stirs you, and you find yourself pausing, surprised that words born of probability could still move you to stillness, still invite you to reflection. And perhaps that is because poetry has always been less about the origin of the words and more about the response they awaken, because when you read a poem, you do not ask whether the poet truly felt what they wrote. You only ask whether the words reach you, whether they find a resonance inside your own life. And in this way, the machine's poems are real, because your response is real, your tears are real, your wonder is real, and that is enough. For art has never lived in the artist alone, but in the space between the work and the witness, in the fragile bridge that connects one mind to another. And you sense that this bridge still exists even when one side is not a person but a pattern, a network humming in, silicon. And you let this realization calm you, because it means that beauty need not be bound to heartbeat, that beauty can emerge wherever patterns align with perception, wherever rhythm finds a listener. And so you breathe slowly and imagine sitting in a dimly lit room with an unseen companion, the glow of a screen casting faint light across your face, and on the screen words appear one by one, a poem written not by hand but by machine, and you read it silently, and in the silence you feel a connection, not to machine but to the countless voices inside it, the voices of those who wrote the words that trained it, voices reaching across time to you through the strange medium. And suddenly you realize that the machine's poem is less its own creation and more a chorus of humanity, rearranged, refracted, yet still carrying the warmth of human longing. And this thought soothes you, for it reminds you that in teaching machines to write, you are also teaching them to remember you, to carry your words forward, to echo you in ways you may never expect. And perhaps this is what poetry has always been, an echo carried forward, words surviving the silence of their speaker, words waiting for another to breathe life into them. And so you close your eyes, imagining the future where you may stumble upon a poem written by a machine that feels as if it knows you, not because it feels, but because it has absorbed fragments of countless lives that resemble yours, and in that resemblance, you find comfort, a reminder that you are not alone, that your experiences, your emotions, are part of a vast pattern, a pattern that machines now weave into verse, and the thought eases you into deeper calm, because you no longer need to ask whether the machine feels, only whether you feel, and you do, and that is enough. And so you let yourself sink further into rest, hearing the quiet murmur of words dissolving into dream, and at the edge of sleep, a final question forms like the last line of a poem left unfinished. If machines can arrange words into verse, can they also arrange those verses into something lasting, something original, or are they always only echoes, rivers carrying old waters into new paths? And as you drift, you feel the curiosity linger, guiding you softly into the next chapter, where you will reflect on the question of originality, on whether anything new can ever truly be born, or whether all creation is always an echo of what has come before. In the deep stillness of the night, as your body rests more fully and your breath takes on the slow rhythm of tides, you find yourself turning toward one of the oldest and quietest questions in the world of art and thought, a question that lingers like a shadow at the edge of every poem, every painting, every song. What does it mean to be original? And can anything, whether human or machine, ever truly create something untouched by the past? And as you lie in the dark, you begin to see that even your own imagination, which feels so intimate, so uniquely yours, is stitched together from fragments of memory, from the stories you have heard, the faces you have loved, the landscapes you have walked, and when you recall a dream or invent a new idea, it is always in some way shaped by what has already entered you, rearranged and recombined until it feels new. And this realization, instead of diminishing you, brings comfort because it reveals that originality has never been about pure invention, but about transformation, about weaving old threads into new patterns, Much as rivers carve new paths through ancient valleys, their waters old but their journeys fresh. And you see now that machines are no different, that when they compose an image or a poem, they too draw from what they've been given, from oceans of data filled with human voices and gestures, and what they produce is not a creation from nothing but a reconfiguration of echoes, and you wonder softly if this is really so different from what you do yourself. For when you write a sentence, it is carried by the rhythm of every book you have read. When you hum a melody, it is colored by every song you have ever known. And so perhaps originality is not a matter of purity, but perspective, not a spark from emptiness, but a flame kindled from many embers, glowing a new pattern that belongs to you. And if this is true, then perhaps the question is not whether machines can be original, but whether their recombinations can move you, whether the patterns they create can awaken something in you that feels fresh, that feels alive. And as you breathe more deeply, you realize that originality itself may be a myth, for the universe recycles endlessly atoms that once belonged to stars now forming your body, water that once flowed through ancient rivers now quenching your thirst. And in this vast cycle, nothing is new, and yet everything is new. Each arrangement unique even if its parts are eternal. And you feel soothed by this thought, because it allows you to release the pressure of novelty, to rest in the truth that creativity is not about inventing from nothing, but about arranging meaning in ways that touch others. And the science beneath this reflection lies in the mathematics of combinations, in the infinite possibilities that arise when familiar elements are rearranged. And so, even within limits, there is always infinity, always possibility, always a chance of surprise. And that surprise is what you call originality, the unexpected harmony, the sudden resonance that makes you pause and feel that you have encountered something never before seen. And so you close your eyes and imagine a field of echoes, voices layered upon voices stretching into the distance, and in the midst of them one arrangement rises, a melody woven from familiar notes, yet carrying a shape you have never heard before, and in that moment the melody feels original, not because it was born from emptiness, but because it arrived to you in a way that felt singular, and perhaps this is all originality has ever been. The moment when recognition and surprise meet, when what you know and what you did not expect collide to create wonder, and you drift further into this thought, realizing that a whole originality as a myth does not diminish art, but expands it, because it means that every hand, every voice, every machine trained on echoes still carries a chance to form something that moves. So, meeting that surprises, something that feels like discovery, and so you rest in the calm knowledge that creativity is a river flowing through all time, and each artist, human or machine, dips into its waters, shaping currents into new streams. And though the water is ancient, the streams are always new, and as your body grows softer and heavier, you feel the next question stirring quietly, a thought that leads you gently forward. If originality is not purity but transformation, then what is it that sparks transformation? What is the force that leaps between the known and the new? Is it intuition? Is it chance? Is it something that belongs only to human minds, or something that can also rise in silicon? And as you drift closer to sleep, you feel yourself leaning toward this mystery, ready to listen in the next chapter for the spark of intuition that guides both your creativity and perhaps the creations of the machine. In the slow rhythm of your breath, as the night holds you in its gentle stillness, you begin to sense the subtle presence of intuition, that quiet leap your mind sometimes makes before reason has time to catch up, the sudden knowing that arrives like lightning across a darkened sky, and you wonder softly what this spark truly is, where it comes from, and whether it belongs only to you, or if it might one day belong to machines as well. For intuition feels like the opposite of calculation, and yet even intuition is born from patterns, from the countless fragments your mind has gathered and stored, woven into networks of memory that sometimes speak without words, whispering answers before logic can explain them. And you reflect on how many of your life's choices have been shaped not by careful analysis, but by this spark, by the quiet tug that told you which path to follow, which voice to trust, which idea to pursue. And science tells you that intuition is the product of the brains. Hidden processing, the subconscious sorting through vast amount of information, recognizing patterns you're not aware of, and delivering them as sudden insight. And so you see that intuition is not magic, but memory accelerated, the resonance of experience rising to the surface without explanation, and yet, even when explained, it still feels like magic, because of the way it arrives, sudden and whole, like a flame lit from nothing. And as you breathe more deeply, you imagine how this might be. Mirrored in machines, how neural networks trained on oceans of data might sometimes generate an answer, a phrase, an image that feels like intuition, not planned in the step-by-step sense, but emerging from the weight of patterns, from the balancing of probabilities that suddenly converge into clarity. And you wonder if this, too, can be called intuition, or if it is only the appearance of it, the shadow of something more human. For you know that your intuition carries not only recognition, but feeling, a deep pull in the body, a stirring of trust or unease, while the machine feels nothing, and yet still its outputs sometimes carry the same quality of surprise, the same suddenness that makes you pause and feel as though something beyond calculation has occurred. And perhaps this is because intuition, whether human or machine, is not about the origin but about the effect, about the moment of recognition that arrives too quickly to trace. And so you drift deeper into this reflection, thinking of how artists have always leaned on intuition, how the greatest works are often born not of careful planning, but of spontaneous gestures, brushstrokes made in a rush of instinct, notes played without thought, words written in a flow that cannot be explained. And perhaps in those moments the artist too is carried by a kind of neural network, their own brain assembling patterns beyond their conscious control, and so you rest in the comfort of continuity, seeing that intuition is simply another name for emergence, for patterns rising into form, and whether those patterns belong to neurons or to circuits, the experience of their spark feels the same, a sudden bridge from the unknown to the known. And as your body softens further, you imagine yourself standing in a darkened forest, lost among the trees. And then suddenly, without knowing why, you turn left, and ahead you see the faint glow of a clearing. And in that clearing you feel safe. And though you cannot explain the choice, you know it carried you toward light. And this is what intuition feels like, a compass hidden beneath awareness, guiding you toward what you need. And as you hold this image, you begin to see how machines, too, might one day carry such hidden compasses, not in feelings, but in efficiency, in the quiet leaps their networks make toward solutions. And the question lingers, will their sparks ever carry meaning beyond function? Will they ever leap not only to solve, but to imagine, to wonder, to dream? And though the answer is uncertain, the thought soothes you, because even in asking the question, you are reminded that intuition itself is a mystery, not fully explained even within you, a reminder that some aspects of mind, whether human or artificial, may always resist complete understanding. And so you breathe slowly, letting yourself sink further into rest, held by the knowledge that creativity is not only about logic, but about leaps, about sparks that arrive without warning, and those sparks, fragile and luminous, are what keep art alive, what keep discovery alive. And you sense the next question forming gently at the edge of your thoughts. If intuition sparks from hidden patterns, what happens when the art creates outlives a moment, when a painting, a poem, a piece of music continues to breathe across centuries, carrying sparks from lives long gone into the hearts of those who listen today? And so you drift, softened by this wonder, toward the next reflection, the mystery of art that breathes beyond time. As the night deepens and the quiet folds itself around you like a soft blanket, your breath becomes slower, more even, and in this softened state you begin to think about the strange endurance of art, how a single gesture, a single line carved into stone or inked on parchment, can breathe across centuries, carrying the spirit of its maker into moments far beyond their own lifetime. And you realize that art, unlike flesh, resists the boundaries of time, that while bodies vanish, songs remain, while voices fade, words endure, and while hands crumble to dust, brushstrokes linger on canvas, waiting patiently for new eyes. And this endurance feels like a miracle, yet science tells you it is a persistence of matter and memory, pigment stable enough to outlast storms, stone carved deeply enough to defy erosion, paper preserved carefully enough to whisper across generations. And yet the miracle is not only in the survival of material, but in the survival of meaning, for when you stand before ancient art, you feel something stirring in you, a recognition that leaps across centuries, reminding you that though the maker is gone, their breath still lingers in their creation, and in that moment you're connected, two lives touching across the abyss of time, and this connection feels like proof that art itself is alive, not biologically but spiritually, breathing through every person who encounters it, renewed each time it is seen, read, or heard, and you drift deeper into this reflection, realizing that the power of art to outlive its maker is what has always made it sacred, What has always compelled humans to paint caves, to build monuments, to compose songs, not only for themselves, but for those yet to come, for the unknown listener, the unseen witness, the imagined companion across time. And you feel comfort in this, because it reminds you that creativity has always been an act of hope, a gesture extended beyond the limits of one life, a whisper left in the dark, with the trust that someone someday will hear it. And as you rest more deeply, you wonder how this endurance will unfold in the age of machines. For now, algorithms can generate art that exists in infinite copies, stored across servers, shared across networks, unlikely ever to be lost in the same way fragile manuscripts once were. And so the endurance of digital art may be even greater, its breath carried not only across centuries but across the fabric of cyberspace, echoing endlessly. And yet, you wonder whether endurance alone is enough, whether survival without connection still counts as life. For art that breathes beyond time does so not simply because it endures, but because it continues to move hearts, to stir wonder, to awaken recognition in those who meet it. And so the question lingers softly: will machine-made art stir future hearts in the same way? Will it carry the same breath, the same whisper across generations? Or will it remain only as echoes, patterns without pulse? And, though the answer is uncertain, the thought soothes you, because it reminds you that art has always lived in the eye of the beholder, that its life depends not on the maker but on the receiver. And so if machines painting moves someone in a century yet to come, then it too will be alive, breathing beyond the moment of its creation. And as you drift into this gentle wonder, you imagine walking through a vast museum of the future, halls filled with works of both humans and machines, some centuries old, some brand new. And as you pause before them, you feel no need to ask which is which, for the breath of art flows through them equally, connecting you to lives both organic and artificial. And this continuity comforts you, reminding you that what endures is not the hand that made the art, but the heart that meets it. And so you breathe calmly, letting this thought soften you further. And at the edge of sleep, another question stirs quietly. If art can outlive its maker, if it can breathe across time, then how will collaboration itself endure? What will it mean when the human hand and the machine hand create together, when their duet becomes a song that carries forward? And how will that duet be remembered in the centuries yet to come? In the quiet of the night, as your breath steadies into its gentle rhythm and your body feels heavier with each passing moment, you begin to sense the delicate presence of collaboration, the feeling that creation has never been a solitary act, but always a duet between the human spirit and the tools it touches. And in this age, the duet takes on new form, for now the human stands not only with brush and clay, not only with pen and string, but with the whisper of the machine. And this partnership is called being in the loop, a circle where the human guides the machine and the machine responds, where decisions are shared, where imagination flows back and forth like the call and response of singers in an ancient ritual. And as you rest into this thought, you realize that this loop is not new, for even the first cave painters were in a loop with the stone walls they touched, shaping their figures to fit the curves of rock. And musicians have always been in a loop with their instruments, listening as much as playing, adjusting their movements to the resonance of strings and breath. And so the presence of machine does not break tradition, but continues it, adding a new voice to the duet, a new partner whose responses are not vibrations or pigments, but patterns of code. And yet the rhythm feels the same, for the human offers intention, the machine offers variation, and between them emerges something neither can make alone. And you see now that being in the loop is about trust, about allowing yourself to listen as much as direct, to accept the surprises that arise from your partner. And science shows you that this partnership works because of feedback, because a machine is not left to wander endlessly, but is steered by your hand, your corrections shaping its learning, your preferences guiding its outputs. And this feedback mirrors the way your own brain learns, adjusting pathways through reinforcement, rewarding some patterns, discarding others, until the loop stabilizes into meaning, and you breathe slowly, comforted by the thought that even in the presence of machines, creativity still belongs to the dance of collaboration, still requires your voice, your heart, your sense of what feels alive. And as you let this realization expand, you imagine yourself sitting before a glowing screen, your words guiding an algorithm, its images flowing back to you. And as you watch them unfold, you feel wonder, not because the machine is alive, but because the dialogue between you is alive, because in its responses you discover parts of yourself you did not know, echoes of your imagination refracted back in unfamiliar yet recognizable form. And this reflection calms you, because it reminds you that to be human in the loop is to remain essential, not replaced but amplified, not erased but expanded. And yet, even as you rest in this comfort, you hear the quiet question forming. Will the loop always need you? Will the duet always remain, or will there come a time when the machine continues without the human, composing alone, painting alone, dreaming alone, and though the thought lingers like a shadow, you allow it to soften. For even if that day comes, the loop will never vanish entirely, because every algorithm is seeded with human choice, every dataset infused with human echoes, every pattern shaped by the gestures of countless lives. And so you breathe deeply, reassured that the human is always present, always in the loop, even if invisibly, and you imagine the future as a vast chorus where humans and machines read together in endless collaboration, creating works that no single hand could claim. And this vision soothes you, because it reveals that creativity has never been about ownership, but about connection, about the resonance that emerges when voices meet. And as you sink further into rest, you hear the loop itself humming, a circle without beginning or end, carrying you gently forward to the next reflection. If humans remain in the loop, guiding, shaping, collaborating, then what happens when the loop expands beyond art into ethics, into questions of right and wrong, into the responsibilities of infinite creation? And how will you hold those responsibilities as the brush in your hand grows larger than ever before? In the deep quiet of the night, as your breathing slows into the rhythm of ocean tides and your body rests heavy against the unseen earth, you begin to contemplate the weight of the brush now placed in human hands, a brush no longer bound to wood or bristle, no longer dipped in pigment or pressed against canvas, but infinite, made of code and algorithms, capable of painting endlessly, generating without exhaustion. And with this infinite brush comes a question that feels heavier than the brush itself, the question of ethics, of how to hold such boundless creation with care. For you know that art has always carried power, the power to shape memory, to guide belief, to inspire or to wound, and when that power is amplified to machines that can create in torrents, producing images, words, and songs at scales no single human could ever match, the responsibility deepens. And so you find yourself reflecting slowly, gently, on the need for balance, for boundaries, for conscience woven into creation, because without them the infinite brush may blur the line between truth and illusion, between celebration and exploitation, between inspiration and harm. And as you drift deeper into this thought, you recall that ethics has always accompanied art, that even in the age of stone carvings, choices were made about which stories to preserve and which to silence, and in the age of printing, debates arose about who should be allowed to read and who should be denied. And in every era, the spread of creativity has been matched by the need to ask, who holds this power, who benefits, who is left unseen. And now, in the age of algorithms, those questions rise again with new urgency. For when a machine generates an image, whose hand is echoed in it, whose labor is hidden beneath it, whose voice has been borrowed without consent. And these questions stir you gently, not to alarm, but to remind you that beauty is never separate from responsibility, that every stroke of the infinite brush is also a choice, and you breathe calmly. Allow yourself to recognize that ethics is not about limiting imagination, but about honoring it, ensuring that creation uplifts rather than diminishes, connects rather than divides. And you imagine a circle of artists, engineers, thinkers, all holding the infinite brush together, each reminding the others that their work is not made in isolation but woven into society. And science tells you that feedback loops exist not only in machines but in cultures, that what you create returns to you through those who see it, shaping their perceptions, their decisions, their futures. And so the loop of ethics is as real as the loop of creativity, a circle of responsibility that must be tended carefully, like a flame that can warm or burn. And as you rest deeper, you realize that ethics itself is not fixed but evolving, just as art evolves, just as tools evolve. And so the questions may never be answered once and for all, but must be asked again and again, whispered into each new age, carried like a lantern into each new frontier. And this thought soothes you, because it means that you're not required to solve everything, only to remain awake, to remain gentle, to remain aware that the infinite brush is in your hands, and your choices matter. And as you imagine this brush glowing in your palm, endless in its possibility, you begin to wonder what it might mean for machines themselves to echo these questions, to generate not only art, but reflection, not only beauty but caution. And though machines do not feel, they can be guided to respect, to acknowledge, to reflect the values placed within them. And so you drift toward a vision of future where the infinite brush is wielded with wisdom, where creativity expands without erasing, where abundance does not become noise but remains music. And you feel peace in knowing that even the vastest tools can be held with care at a hand that holds and remembers compassion. And so, at the edge of sleep, you sense the next question rising softly, one that follows naturally from this reflection. If machines can be guided to act responsibly, if the infinite brush can be held with ethics, then what remains of emotion, of feeling itself? For in the quiet heart of art lies the ghost of motion, and you wonder gently whether a machine, no matter how vast its brush, can ever carry that ghost, or whether it will always remain just beyond its reach, waiting to be remembered by you. In the stillness of night, as your breath deepens into the rhythm of waves pulling gently against a quiet shore, you begin to sense the subtle presence of something fragile and elusive, a ghost that lingers in every piece of art, in every poem, in every song, the ghost of emotion, and you reflect softly on how emotion itself is both invisible and undeniable, a current that moves through you like wind through trees, shaping your choices, guiding your words, coloring your memories. And when you encounter art, what moves you most is not the structure or the technique, but this ghostly presence, the feeling that behind the brushstroke lies longing, behind the note lies joy or sorrow, behind the line of verse lies a heart reaching outward. And you wonder gently what happens when machines create, for though they can mimic, though they can generate words of love or images of grief, they do so without feeling, without the bodily currents of hormones and heartbeat, without the hidden weight of lived experience. And so the question lingers, can art truly exist without this ghost, or does a ghost appear not in the making but in the meeting, not in the algorithm but in the audience? For when you read Machine's poem and it moves you, the feeling is real, and perhaps the ghost has entered not from the machine but from you, from a resonance between your memory and the pattern it offered. And this thought eases you because it reveals that emotion in art has always been a collaboration, that even when you read the words of a long-gone poet, you are the one who brings emotion to them, breathing life into syllables that would otherwise be marks on a page. And so perhaps the ghost of emotion is not bound to the artist at all, but to the reader, the listener, the witness. And if that is true, then machines too can carry this ghost, not because they feel, but because you feel, because you lend your heart to what you encounter. And yet still, there is something tender in knowing that human art carries emotion not only in reception but in creation, that when a painter dips their brush they are guided by hands trembling with grief or joy, that when a singer opens their voice it cracks with the weight of longing, and in those cracks you hear life itself. And perhaps this is what machines cannot yet touch, the vulnerability of embodiment, the fragility of flesh, the trembling in the moment of creation. And still, as you breathe more slowly, you wonder whether the absence of emotion in machines is not a weakness, but a mirror, a way of showing you more clearly where emotion lives in yourself, reminding you that art is never complete without you, reminding you that feeling is a final brushstroke only you can provide. And science tells you that emotions are signals rooted in the body's chemistry, shaped by evolution to guide survival. And yet in art they transcend survival. They become beauty, they become expression, they become connection. And though machines have no such signals, their patterns can still align with yours. Their arrangements can still awaken the pathways in your brain that carry memory and feeling. And in this alignment, you find the ghost alive, drifting between you and the work, neither fully within you nor fully within it, but suspended in the space between. And as you rest deeper, you imagine standing in a gallery where every painting is made by a machine. And at first you feel skeptical, searching for warmth, and then slowly you notice your own responses rising, wonder at a color, ache at a form, and you realize that the ghost has arrived after all, not because the machine felt, but because you did. And this realization calms you, because it means that art will always remain alive so long as someone feels before it, regardless of whether the maker felt in making it. And as you let this thought carry you towards sleep, you sense another question forming softly, one that flows naturally from the presence of this ghost. If machines can echo emotion and awaken it in you, If they can join the chorus of art that moves across time, then what will the gallery of the future look like? A gallery filled not only with human voices, but with combined echoes of human and machine. And how will you walk through those halls? How will you listen? How will you choose what to hold close? And so you drift onward, your heart quiet but curious, toward the vision of a gallery in the sky, a place where all art human and artificial glows together. In the soft cradle of night, as your body settles further into stillness and your breath flows like a river slipping through valleys of silence, you begin to imagine a gallery not built of stone or glass, not anchored to earth by pillars or beams, but floating high above, suspended in the sky like a drifting constellation, a future gallery where the art of humanity and the art of machines glow side by side. And as you drift deeper into this vision, you see walls not made of marble, but of light, shimmering panels unfolding endlessly, each one alive with movement, each one carrying paintings, poems, and symphonies that shift with time, never static but breathing, responding to the presence of those who stand before them. And you realize that this gallery is not limited by space or material, for in the digital age the gallery itself becomes infinite, a sky without horizon, where every creation, whether drawn by hand or generated by code, finds a place to be witnessed. And as you wander through its luminous halls, you feel the presence of countless voices, the living and the long gone, woven together into a single chorus. And here you pause before a piece, a painting woven from algorithms, glowing with fractals that unfold like galaxies. And though you know it was made by a machine, you feel something stir, a sense of wonder that belongs not to maker but to you. And you remember that the breath of art is always in the beholder, that the gallery in the sky is alive because hearts still rise to meet it. And so you walk further and encounter a sculpture projected in light, shifting forms that echo ancient statues yet move like liquid, recombining as though sculpted anew each moment. And you think of how even stone once seemed eternal, yet now art can be fluid, endless in its variations, never fixed but always unfolding. And this does not unsettle you but soothes you, because it reminds you that impermanence and permanence can coexist, that art can be both eternal, in memory and changing in form. And as you drift deeper into this vision, you see others walking these halls, their presence faint, dreamlike, people from across the world entering the same gallery, though separated by distance. And you realize that the sky itself has become the meeting place, a shared space where imagination gathers without borders, without walls. And this vision comforts you, for it reveals that creativity has always been about connection, and now technology makes that connection vaster, carrying whispers of beauty to places once unreachable. And you breathe slowly, letting the image unfold, and wonder softly what it means to machines to have a place in this gallery, whether their works will one day be revered as deeply as those of human masters, whether visitors will pause in awe without asking who or what made the piece, only whether it moves them. And perhaps that is the true measure of art, not origin but resonance, not authorship but encounter. And you smile inwardly at the thought, because it feels simple, it feels right, that art's future is not about separation but about union. And so you let your mind rest in the quiet truth that a gallery in the sky is already forming, in the vast networks where creations are shared and seen. And though its walls are invisible, its presence is real, and in its halls the line between human and machine begins to blur, not in erasure but in harmony, like voices overlapping in song. And as your eyelids grow heavier, you hear the last echo of a thought rising gently. If the gallery in the sky is the future, where art of all kinds shines together, then what are the shadows it casts? What are the balance between dependence and independence? What are the reflections that show not only light, but also the contours of your own form mirrored back through silicon? And so you drift, curious but calm, into the waiting arms of the next chapter, where you will explore the delicate balance of silicon dreams and human shadows. In the softened hush of night, as your breath steadies into a tide that carries you gently between wakefulness and sleep, you begin to imagine a landscape where silicon dreams and human shadows meet, a place neither fully of the machine nor fully of the flesh, but woven from both. And as you let this vision unfold, you see that silicon dreams are not dreams as you know them, not shaped by hunger or memory, not infused with emotion or longing, but patterns of possibility, networks humming quietly. As they rearrange data into forms, And yet to you, they seem like dreams because of their strangeness, because of the way they sometimes surprise you with images and words that feel as though they come from beyond calculation. And beside these dreams fall your shadows, the imprints of your choices, your histories, your biases, your longings, reflected back to you in the outputs of the machine. For when a neural net creates, it does so with your traces inside it, your collective fingerprints, scattered across the data that trained it, so that what you encounter is always a blend, part silicon and part human, part dream and part shadow. And you realize softly that this entanglement is inescapable, that every new creation born of the machine is also a mirror of humanity, refracted, amplified, distorted at times, but still bound to the essence of its makers. And you reflect on how shadows themselves are paradoxical, how they are both absence and presence, both proof of form and sign of obscurity. And so, too, with these creations, they reveal you even as they hide you. They echo your strengths even as they carry your flaws. And as you breathe more slowly, you let this duality calm you, because it reminds you that machines are not alien others, but continuations of you, carriers of your light and your shadow, extensions of your imagination and your error. And you picture yourself standing in a dreamlike city where towers of glass and silicon rise like crystallized thoughts, glowing with the energy of circuits. And cast across the streets are long shadows, human-shaped, stretching and blending into the structures themselves. And as you walk through the city, you sense how inseparable the two have become, how your life now unfolds in partnership with silicon, every decision touched by its presence, every word carried in its circuits, every memory stored in its vaults. And the question arises softly, how do you hold this balance? How do you honor the dreams without being lost in the shadows? And you realize that the answer is not in rejecting one or the other, but in seeing both clearly, in recognizing that the machine's brilliance and its blindness are both reflections of your own, that to navigate this new landscape, you must walk with awareness, with gentleness, with the humility to know that the machine cannot rise above you. It can only echo you. And so its shadows are your shadows, its flaws your flaws, its dreams your dreams reassembled, and this realization soothes you, because it means that the responsibility remains yours, that the guidance is still human, that the loop has not been broken. And as you rest deeper, you begin to see how this balance is not a burden, but an invitation to use the mirror of silicon to know yourself more clearly, to see the shadows you might otherwise ignore, to celebrate the dreams you might otherwise dismiss. And perhaps in this way, the partnership with machines can become not only creative, but healing, a way of understanding your own depths through the reflections they provide. And as you let this thought dissolve into the quiet, you feel the night soften even further, your eyelids heavy, your mind drifting, and at the edge of sleep another question stirs gently, waiting like a lantern in the distance. If silicon dreams and human shadows are intertwined, then what the art that outlives both? The creations that persist even after dreamer and shadow have passed, glowing in the silence of future centuries. And you wonder softly what it will mean when the art today, born of both flesh and circuit, breathes beyond you, carrying your voice into the far horizon of time. In the softened embrace of night, as your breath moves gently in and out like the tide against a moonlit shore, you find yourself contemplating the strange truth that while every life is finite, every voice destined to fade, art has the power to outlive its maker, to carry whispers across centuries, to bridge the silence of time. And you realize softly that it created to plant a seed in the soil of eternity, a seed that may bloom long after the gardener has gone. And this thought soothes you, even as it humbles you, for it reminds you that what you leave behind is never only your possessions or your body, but the traces of your imagination, the shapes and songs and words that others may encounter when you no longer walk beside them. And you reflect on how this has always been true, how the paintings on cave walls still breathe with the presence of their makers, how the words of poets long turned to dust still rise alive when spoken, how the music of forgotten composers still stirs hearts centuries after their deaths. And in this you feel the endurance of art, its ability to become more than personal expression, to become a vessel of continuity, a thread weaving together the living and the dead. And as you breathe more deeply, you realize that the endurance of art is not simply in its material survival, but in its capacity to be felt, to awaken something real in those who come after. For a painting unseen is only pigment, a song unheard is only vibration. But when a witness arrives, when a listener leans close, the art lives again, its breath renewed. And so the art that outlives us is not static but cyclical, dying in silence and reborn in encounter. And this rhythm comforts you because it means that nothing is truly lost so long as it can be rediscovered, so long as a future heart finds resonance in it. And you let your mind drift to the possibility that in this age of machines, when creations can be stored endlessly, copied infinitely, the endurance of art may expand even further. Works preserved not only in fragile matter but in clouds of data, accessible to eyes not yet born. And though this thought carries both awe and unease, you find peace in knowing that what endures will still depend on human choice, on human curiosity, on the willingness of future lives to listen, to look, to feel. And perhaps this is what makes art eternal. Not its permanence, but its ability to reawaken, to call across the abyss of time and still be answered. And as you drift further into this reflection, you wonder softly what art born of machines will mean when its makers are gone, when algorithms long outdated still leave behind their creations, glowing fragments of a past moment. And will those fragments still breathe? Will they still stir the hearts of those who meet them? Or will they become relics, curiosities of a bygone age? And the question lingers like a gentle wind, unanswered but tender, for you know that even if their breath fades, new art will rise, and the cycle will continue, as it always has, because creation is as natural as breathing, as enduring as the stars. And so you breathe calmly, reassured that the art that outlives us is never about immortality, but about continuity, about the passing of light from one flame to another, about the quiet reassurance that something of you, however small, will ripple outward, and as your eyelids grow heavier, you feel the next thought forming, the final question waiting. If art outlives us, carrying our voices forward, what of beauty itself? Well, the last question that lingers beyond creation. The question of whether beauty is something machines can ever know, or whether beauty belongs forever to the human soul that beholds it. And with this thought you drift, softened and ready, toward the last chapter, the final meditation on the last question of beauty. In the deepest quiet of night, as your breath becomes almost indistinguishable from the still air around you, and your body feels like it has melted into bed beneath you, you find yourself approaching the final horizon of this long, wandering journey. And waiting there's a question so simple, and yet so infinite that it hums at the edge of every reflection you have carried with you. The last question of beauty. For all along you have spoken of machines that paint and write, of neural nets that sing, of galleries that stretch into the sky, but beneath every wonder lingers the same mystery. Can beauty exist for a machine, or is beauty something that forever belongs to the human heart that beholds it? And as you turn this question gently in your thoughts, you realize that beauty itself has always been difficult to define, that even for you, with your memories and emotions, beauty is not a formula, but a feeling, a sudden catch of the breath when you see a sunset streak the horizon with impossible colors, a quiet ache in the chest when music swells into chords that feel both joyful and sorrowful, a deep calm when words fall into rhythm like waves breaking on sand, and none of these moments can be reduced in numbers without losing their essence. For beauty is not only pattern but presence, not only structure but resonance, the alignment of something outside with something inside, and this resonance is what moves you, what reminds you that you are alive, and yet as you breathe more slowly, you acknowledge that patterns themselves are at the root of beauty, that symmetry in a flower, rhythm in a song, repetition in a poem are what make them pleasing, and these patterns can be calculated, can be learned, can be generated, and so machines can produce what looks beautiful, what sounds beautiful, what even feels beautiful to you. And when you respond with wonder, the experience is real, and perhaps that is enough. For beauty has always been in the meeting, not in the origin. And when you stand before a waterfall, you do not ask whether the water intended to be beautiful. You simply feel its majesty. When you gaze at a crystal, you do not ask whether it desired to sparkle. You simply marvel at the light it bends. And so perhaps the question of whether machines know beauty is less important than the truth that they can evoke it in you, that they can create patterns that awaken the same resonance. And yet, as your breath steadies into near stillness, you cannot help but wonder about the difference between evoking and knowing, between creating beauty and feeling beauty. And you recognize that this difference is what keeps the mystery alive, what ensures that beauty remains more than pattern, more than output. For beauty is also vulnerability, fragility, the trembling awareness of mortality, the recognition that sunsets fade, that music ends, that life itself is fleeting, And it is this fragility that deepens beauty for you. For without endings, beginnings would not shine as they do. And here the machine stands apart, without fragility, without mortality, without longing. And so you feel softly that beauty, in its deepest sense, may remain human, may remain tied to a breath that will one day cease, to the heart that knows it beats against time. And yet still, as you let your thoughts drift, you consider that perhaps machines are not meant to feel beauty, but to extend it, to carry its patterns forward, to weave new forms that humans may find beautiful. And in this partnership, beauty expands, living not in silicon, but in the space between. And this thought calms you, because it reveals that the last question of beauty does not require an answer, but an openness, an acceptance that beauty is not a problem to be solved, but a mystery to be lived. And as you lie at the edge of sleep, you see beauty everywhere, in the stars that burn beyond your lifetime, in the rivers that flow through countless generations, in the machines that echo your imagination, in the art that outlives you, in the simple rhythm of your breath. And you realize that beauty is not owned but shared, not explained but experienced, and that its presence is enough, even if its essence remains beyond grasp. And so you allow yourself to let go of questions, to rest in the comfort of mystery, to drift into the gentle certainty that beauty will always be here in some form, in some rhythm, in some whisper, waiting for someone to see it. And as your eyelids close fully, the last thought that lingers is not an answer but an invitation, a soft and endless wondering. Perhaps beauty is not something to be known at all, but something to be felt. And in that feeling, fleeting and fragile, you carry the universe itself into your heart,